Report for your interview. Now, this subject can be used as interview or court date. And I will use them interchangeable because I thought we use interview because it sounds a little softer than report for your trial, report for your court date. Because it could be said that Job is not only being interviewed, but he is being interrogated, he's being questioned, and he needs to answer some questions. And he does not have a choice to answer. Most of us understand that these jobs that we work on, most of them have individuals that's in charge. They use the title, some of the titles, the CEO, chief executive officer, president. And we know that they are the ones that are usually in top positions or in the rule-making business right behind the owner. They're the ones that makes or approves the rules or the guidelines that we answer to as we work on those jobs that they are over. And most of us, if we be honest about it, it does not say we don't like our job, but if we have been working on our job for a while, there are some decisions that you did not agree that came down from the top. Anybody here with me? Or maybe somebody maybe y'all agree with everything that happened. I enjoyed my job. I enjoyed both of the jobs, all of the jobs I worked, the years I worked on the fire department. I enjoyed it tremendously, but there were some decisions that sometimes I did not agree with. And I said in my mind that if I was in that position, I would have done different. Anybody here but me? I'm not the only one. Y'all be honest, y'all said it too. And if I was in that position, I would have done different. And so I asked you the question, what would you have done different? I said it this morning, well, Rev, that's an open-ended question. If you had gotten me then, I could have told you. Well, the good news is that the position is open. And if you qualify, the position is yours. Really, this was the case with Job. Job believed that he had been treated unfairly by God. He believed that because of who he was, a righteous man, and he believed that he should not have to go through the storms he was encountering. And really, we don't have to go back to Job because we can look in our own sanctuary. We can look in our own homes, and many times the bumps that we've had in our lives, we really don't believe that should be happening in our lives. We don't believe that we should ever have to go through any storms. And remember, Job had said in the 13th chapter of Job, the 22nd verse, Job had said this because Job wanted to talk to God about these unpleasant feelings he had. I remember Job said it like this in the 22nd chapter 13, 22nd verse rather, from the New Living Translation. Job said, now summons me, and I will answer. That's a tough word. Job said, I want you to call me to the witness stand. Or he said, or let me speak to you and you reply. Really what he said, it don't make me no difference. I got some questions for you, even if you don't ask me. And 31st chapter of Job, verse 35, he said, oh, that one would hear me. Behold, my desire is that the Almighty would answer me, and that my adversary had written a book. In other words, it's about all the stuff that's happening in my life. And we, like Job, maybe at times have questioned God on events that have happened in our life, especially when we believe that we are innocent. Why didn't I get the job? I had as much education, as much training as they had. why did my child have to become sick? And I confess up, I've asked that many times, even when Randolph brought up the conversation on Thursday that his little great-grand niece, cousin was able to say, Papa. And so I asked God, will I ever hear Jay said, Granddaddy? Not that he's been wrong, we've been wrong, but we ask sometimes, why us? What did we do? Why we didn't get the promotion? Why our children are not doing what you have assigned them? What did we do? And so this is what Job was asking, why did my child have to die? It really should be not the parent's position to bury the child, but that's what we made up. So we ask the question, why it shouldn't be this way. And so we may be like Job, questioning God's wisdom and his judgment. Because really that's what we're doing when we don't believe that God made the right decision. We don't say it in that manner, but that's really what we say. God, if you had given it to me, if I could have handled this a little bit. Anybody here with me? You don't have to say it out loud, but I know you won't say it, but you said it. You asked God, well, God, if you just answer me. Maybe that's what Job said. If you come talk to me, I can explain, I can argue my case. So Job said, I want my day in court. Put me so you can put me in charge. For I could have done a better job. And Job, God says to Job, in our text, Job, I tell you what, report for your interview. A report for your trial. You want this position, CEO. But before you can get it, you have to fill out a resume. You got to answer some questions for top positions. So you need to let me know you're qualified to handle these questions. Why you feel that I have been unfair to you. I need to ask you something, because you are asking me, or you are bringing charges that against me, saying I am your enemy. Listen at verse 24, the 13th chapter. Job said, wherefore, he's talking to God, hidest thou face? In other words, we ought to already know God don't have to hide from us. Yeah, turn to 13th chapter quickly. I know you don't believe it's in there, but we've gone over it before. He said, wherefore hidest thou face? And when you're done wrong and they don't want you to see them, they do kind of. And then he said, and holdest me for thy enemy. Job, this is not your enemy. But remember, these are the charges that he brings against God. He said God had turned his back on him, forsaken him. And so chapter 38 opens with this long-awaited interview or day in court that Job had requested. So he could prove himself innocent and get God to say that God had mistakenly done him wrong. Listen again to the request that Job made. 13th chapter, verse 22. We've already read it, but I want to read it again to your hearing. From the New Living Translation, Job said, now summons me, call me, put me. I'm bad enough. I want you to call me. I want to now summons me, and I will answer. I'm not going to plead no fifth. I want you to put me on the list, or let me speak to you and you reply, because I know I'm right. So God give Job this day in court, or this interview. And I want to look at the outcome, part of the outcome today. Because we too suffers sometime as we go through life with what Job was in his life. Now today, these points really won't add up like sometimes they do. So you can just bunch all this together and say, we're going to just talk about it and get to the end where we need to get. But the first point that we can truly know, and this is shouting news, because first point we can know is that God will answer our request or our charge. You see, the request could be a prayer. The charge is that you said God has wronged you. But tell your neighbor, he will answer. That's some good news, isn't it? It ought not take Job to let us know that God will answer our request. Will he answer our request? And I can tell you, when I talked to God about my dad, he said, God, my dad really wasn't doing all that stuff, and you could have done. He was able enough to answer my charge too. To tell you, he'll answer your request, and he also answers your charge. Listen at verse 1 of the 38th chapter. Then the Lord, is that your Bible? Answered Job from the whirlwind. One thing we grasp from this is God will show up. But he lets us know he does not show up how we think he ought to show up. And he does not show up when we think he ought to show up. But the songwriter said, and they even sing that song, but he is an on-time God. Tell your neighbor, he's an on-time God. Anybody know he's an on-time? Tell it over here, he is an on-time God. And first point is that he shows up, and he might not show up like we think he ought to show up, because God does not always come like we think he ought to come. But we can also find out that he'll come in an unexpected way. Because remember, the text says he shows up in a world. But now, remember Job, when it comes to talking about a strong wind, the only thing he's probably thinking about a strong wind is that his mind goes back to when the one servant escaped when his children got killed. That it was a strong wind that blew the house down. So God can take your bad and turn it into good. And so now he comes in a strong way. So tell your neighbor, God will answer. That's all you need to know. God will answer. It doesn't matter. He will answer. Might not come when he's not going to answer on your time, but he's going to. The second point is that what he does once he shows up is he lets you know that he's in charge of this interview. He's in charge of this deposition. He's in charge of these questions. You know, sometimes we think we're in charge, but God lets us know he's conducting the interview. In other words, Job wanted God to be on the defense. But God tells Job, I'm the prosecutor. I'm going to be the one asking the question and bringing. Y'all want to see it? Look at verse 2. Y'all got your eyes on verse 2? Who is? Listen at what God says to Job. I'm from the New Living Translation. Who is this that questions my wisdom with such ignorant words? The King James said, who is this that darken counsel by words without knowledge? Who? I'm Job. I'm Ester. Do anybody know Ester outside this place much? And look at yourself. Don't just look at me. You die and see if somebody from California, they run your obituary right there. They said, Catherine who? I should have said Ester. And so God let Job know, Job, this is really bigger than you. And so God says that this word knowledge, it's a noun meaning. It can mean knowledge, learning, discernment, insight, and notion. And Job was guilty of speaking without discernment. But he addressed God previously without thinking. And that's what happens sometimes when we get in our pity parties. We talk to God before we think. And so God calls Job's words from the New Living Translation as ignorant words, questioning my wisdom. And And so my question is that tell your neighbor, God is in charge. And so when we bring it to him, he flips it back on us. And so instead of him answering Job charges, he asked Job, who is this that questions me with ignorant words? And so then he tells Job Job, so God was saying to Job, do you think you can do better than me with ignorant words? And so he tells Job, you've been wanting this interview. You've been wanting me to talk to you. I'm here now. So he tells Job and he says to us, you got to be careful when you call God on the carpet. Because God is a God of mercy. God is a God of grace. But God is also a God of... So listen to what God tells Job. Y'all got the third point here. Look at what he tells Job. Job, Ester, and whoever bring charges against me, he said, prepare yourself for a battle. This will not be a formality. You know, sometimes you go before interviews and you really get in there for an interview and they say, oh, you don't have to say nothing. This position already yours. You know, so-and-so told me he was sending you down here. And all I got to do is just go to the formality, you know, saying you showed up. So if anybody says something. But tell your neighbor, this is not a formality. Because God tells Job, y'all got your eyes on, look at what he tells Job. I'm going to read it from the New Living Translation. Brace yourself like a man, because I have some questions for you, and you must answer them. The King James says it like this. The King James says, gird up now thy loins like a man, for I will demand of thee. Ain't no plead, no fifth. Is that your Bible? He said, I will demand of thee and answer that. You got to answer me. Ain't none of this about, well, pleading the fifth. And so he says to him, now you got to understand, this Hebrew thought, and Job understood when he said brace yourself, because it meant that you need to make yourself as strong as possible. Because back then they wore robes. And they didn't understand they faced a similar problem that these young men do with their breeches down below their. You can't run too fast. You can't do nothing. You get in a fight and you gotta try to. And when you pull them up, I'm knocking you out. And so what God tells Job is, Job, you got to remember, seriously, they wore robes. And when they got ready for battle or to run, they put a girdle to hold it up and to hold it tight. And so God tells Job, brace yourself, because you are in it for a fight. You need to give me your best, because I'm not short-stepping. And so that's what he says to him. He says that do your best, because you're getting ready for a strenuous test. And so I said, well, God, that sounds pretty good. First of all, you done showed up. You done let him know you're in charge of this, because you tell him how this going to be going. Then third, you tell him that he needs to make sure he bring his best, because you're not coming short-stepping. And I said, well, God, that sounds good. And the fourth point, I told you they need to be short, because we had a few points today. The last point, but it's going to be a long point. Tell your neighbor, the last point is God said, let the interview or interrogation begin. Y'all ready? I know you're ready, because Job already said, I know what I'm going to ask him, right? If he show up, I already got my list of questions. There's a lawyer out there. They already got them ready. He said, show up. When you show up, Job, God shows up, and Job told God, I got my whole list. But the problem is, God's in charge of this. And so he says to us, first of all, listen at the first few questions that God puts before Job. Because remember, God tells Job, no, I'm going to do the question and answer. I'm in charge of this interview. And you know, when you go before an interview, you always have a few questions you want to ask. How much am I going to make? You know, what's my working schedule? You know, what my days or how many vacations I get? But God tells Job, now you put all that to the back burner, because I'm answering my question first. You know, you might not even get to a vacation Because if you don't get the job, don't be worried about no vacation. And you might not need to worry about the pay, because if you don't get the job, your pay ain't important to you if you ain't got no job. Y'all with me? And so God tells Job, Job, you just hold all your questions. I'm going to put mine before you first. So isn't it strange, his first three questions, he asked where, who, and whereupon. Listen to him. First question he asked Job, and y'all got your eyes on it? Fourth verse. Where was thou when Satan laid, I'm sorry, let me get this straight. When I laid the foundation of the earth. Now what God is telling Job right now, Job, you see what I've done? And you questioning me? I laid the foundation. And what I need to let you know that the earth didn't just come in by some matter that just exploded. I laid the foundation. Where were you at? Can you even trace your generation back that far? And so that's really what God's telling us. You're questioning me, but where was you when I started all of this from the beginning? And he goes on to say that now he gets really bold with Job, or he really degrades Job enough, because he said, declare it if thou have understanding. But I didn't hear no answer. Did anybody answer? Because it goes to the next verse. Verse 5, and I didn't see nothing about Job said. Did y'all hear anything about Job said? Did you see anything about Esther said? Did you see anything about Mercer said? So it says, go to the next one, because you can't answer that one. That's above your, I know that's when we get to, we have the positions that, there's Sanders over there, he's the big top thing, and when it's above our head, we say that's above our pay scale. So this was above Job. He goes to verse 4, verse 5, y'all got your eyes on the right quick. Now he says, remember he's asked to where now, right? And so he asks him another question. He said, well, maybe you can handle this one. Who hath laid the measures thereof? Talking about the earth. If thou knowest. Oh, y'all got that. A lot of silence from this boy said that if you show up, I'm going to answer you. And if you show up, if you don't want me to answer you, you answer me. Well, you can't even answer these simple questions yet. And so he says that, who had laid the foundation, if thou knowest, God really played with it. Or who has stretched the line upon it? Maybe you know that. No answer, you don't know, admit. Okay, well, he said, well, surely you know this one. Verse 6, y'all got your eyes on it? Whereupon? He said, where are the foundations thereof fastened? In other words, what's holding this? Come on. No answer again. Lord have mercy. No answer, young folk. But we calling God on the carpet. You have mistreated me. I don't deserve to get what I'm getting. But God continues on and just raise up a few more questions, because this first answering period goes from chapter 38, chapter 39, and then it ends in the end of chapter 39. Let's look at a couple more questions he had, Job. Verse 12. Y'all put your eyes on verse 12. I'm in chapter 38. Hast thou commanded the morning since the day, and caused the day spring to know his place? In other words, that's from day to night. Surely if you're talking about being the big dog in charge, the sun can't stop rising. Because if it do, you can't eat. Right? Moon got to stop. Can you answer? Can you handle that? Can't handle that, God. I'm sorry. Above my pay scale. Well, maybe you got this one, Joe. Go to verse 32. Can you direct the sequence of the seasons, or guide the bear with her cubs across the heavens? God, you knew these things was hard to me. You could have given me some I could handle. Well, he said, well, maybe I understand. Go to chapter 39, Job. Let's skip over. Maybe you can handle this one. Y'all got your eyes on verse 19? That was from the Living Translation. Let's look at this one too from the Living Translation. Have you given the horse its strength, or clothed its neck with the flowing mane? And so God continues to question or interview or interrogate Job regarding numerous aspects of nature that Job had no answers for any. And so this first set of questions continued to be until the end of chapter 39. But chapter 40 opens with God asking Job, do you still think I'm unfair? Do you still want to argue with me? Do you still think that you can do a better job than I've done? And why don't we ask ourselves that as we tell God that, God, we don't believe that you treated us fair. And so really listen to what God asked Job, and then Job responds to God. And I want to leave you there because I didn't want you to leave you with Job being in total silence. But I wanted you to see how Job responded to the first set of roughly 70 questions. Yeah, listen, y'all got your eyes on verse 1 of chapter 40? Flip over there. I'm going to read it from the New Living Translation. Then the Lord said to Job, he said to him, y'all see verse 2? Do you still want to argue with the Almighty? You are God's critic, but do you have the answers? Director Smith, I was the division chief on the Memphis Fire Department, and we would always take complaints, and he said that if you're going to criticize and come with complaints, sometimes you ought to have some solutions. So listen to what God says again. He says to Job, Job, do you still want to argue with the Almighty? You're God's critic, but do you have the answers? Now you can tell me what I shouldn't do, but do you know what he should have done? Doctor, do you know? We know what he should, in our eyes, say what he shouldn't have done, but what should he have done? You shouldn't have let me get sick. Well, if I didn't let you get sick, somebody else might not know that if they trust in me, that God can bring them through it. It's a bigger picture than just, if God hadn't allowed Job to go through it, we would not know that if God allowed it to be taken away, God can give us not just what we had, but he can give us more than we had from the beginning. Okay, neighbor, that's something that Job had. Through Job, we found that out, right? And so if God had not used Job, if God had not used us, if God had not used Reverend Campbell to let us know that he can show up just in the nick of time when it comes down to a liver transplant, this young lady that's now laying on life support, we know that if God so choose, because there's Sister Campbell right there, she can tell you that we didn't tell the whole story because they didn't tell me to tell the whole story. They said that if he didn't get a liver transplant, he would not come home from the hospital. But he's home from the hospital and didn't come home in a box. I'm going to say it again, y'all. They called that. He's at home and he didn't come home in a box. But they said if he didn't get the liver transplant, he would not come home. He is at home, and she's here. And so what God is telling us, because of that, we can let the young lady know that's laying in the hospital that the Hebrew boy said he might not come. But if he wants to, he's got the power to come. And when he comes, he got the power to heal. Somebody ought to tell God thank you. So in your darkest days, because what God has already done for somebody else, it gives us some hope, y'all. Let me finish this stuff. Let me finish, because I get happy about looking at what God has allowed us to do, allowed us to see. And so then Job replied. So Job did answer now. He gets the courage to finally answer. Y'all got your eyes on verse 3 through 5. And so he says in verse 3, y'all got your eyes on it? Then Job replied to the Lord. That's real simple. I'm reading from the New Living Translation. I am nothing. How could I ever find the answers when I don't have the wisdom? God, you made me, and you made me a little lower than the angels. You already knew I didn't know what I was talking about. That's why the doctors told us when Jace was in the hospital, I can talk about this personally, that we don't know what's going on. That's what they told us at first. It's like finding a needle in a haystack. And we hear that all the time that the doctor said, when I heard this come out the doctor's mouth in one of the meetings one morning. So Job says to God, I am nothing. How could I ever find the answer? You knew who I was when you made me. And that's why I knew how much you could handle. But then Job goes on to say, I will cover my mouth with my hand. Not you. You the one saying you were going. If he show up. If he show up. But isn't it strange when God does show up? That he lets us really see how big we really are, really how qualified we are. Job said in the last verse, and I'm ready to leave y'all, I have said too much already. I have nothing more to say. Job was saying to God, whatever you are doing, just keep on doing it. I understand. Our Deacon Scale would always make that statement because he realized that even in the midst of some bad days, that God had it all under control. And so what he was saying, that God, you hadn't done anything wrong yet. And since you hadn't done anything wrong yet, just keep on doing what you, anybody in here but me, that ought to make you happy. That God, just keep on. I don't understand why I'm going through some things, but God says you got it all under control. Just keep on doing what you're doing. In other words, when Job finally said that, he was saying, God, you are sovereign. You have all the answers. And so instead of questioning you, I want to thank you for loving me. I want to thank you for looking past my faults and supplying all of my needs. For you do not have to let me live, but you did. Because there's others had illness like I had that's died, but thanks be to God. You let me live just one more day. You ought to tell God, thank you. Shield always said like this in his prayer, the roads that I travel, somebody have died on those roads. But tell God, y'all ain't caught it yet, the roads that you've already traveled, somebody have died, but God allowed you to go past it and brought you saved one more day. And you ought to tell God, thank you. And so God, Job just said, I understand now, God, I really shouldn't be talking. I should be just listening. You have the answers and the plans that I never could have done, never could have thought of. And Job was really saying to God, taking us back to verse 19 of that, verse 25 of that 19th chapter, when Job said, God, I remember now really how great you are. I remember how great a planner you were, because you was already planning something while I was sitting there complaining. But Job didn't know who God was. And that's why Job said in that 19th chapter, verse 25, for I know that my Redeemer live, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. So Job was saying, thank you in advance, God, for sending Jesus. That's really what he was saying. Somewhere down the line, he came back to his senses. And that's what he was saying, God, thank you. I don't understand why I'm suffering right now, but thank you for already putting it in place. That when this life on this side cannot afford me a home anymore, I know that my Redeemer lives, and he shall stand with me at the last day. Jesus, the one who would pay our sin debt. That's really what he was saying. Thank you for sending him. The one that would die on Calvary, put in a borrowed grave, get up early on the third day morning with all power. And Job was just saying, I said, thank you, God. And really, thank you for Jesus paying our sin debt, that we'll have eternal life. And any of y'all got your ticket that once said hell, but now say heaven? If you got it, you ought to tell God, thank you also. And if you don't have it, you ought to tell him, thank you, that it's available. All you got to do is say, believe in your heart, confess with your mouth, and you can also get that ticket. So Job was saying, thank you for the interview, but I'm unqualified for the position. You got it all under control. And this will also be our statement. God, I thank you for all that you've done for me. And God, I may not understand it all, but when I look back over my life, I can see all that you have done for me. I don't understand why you let some rain come into my life, but I can understand, I tell you, thank you for the rain. Because if it had not been for the rain, I would not know how to understand except the sunshine. But anybody in here that God tell God, thank you, even for the sun, even for the rain. Because if he had not allowed the rain to shine in Job's life, when you got in your storm, you would have wanted to throw in the towel. But because of Job, this 1 through the 41st chapter, we know now we're in the 42nd chapter. And I want to get there. But tell your neighbor, you won't stay there always. Either God will take you out of it or he'll take you through it. But whatever he do, we can shout, hallelujah, because God is able. And so Job was saying that, God, I look back over my life, and instead of complaining and criticizing now, he said, after I look back over my life, I don't understand why I'm in the storm, but instead of complaining, I'm going to tell God. Instead of complaining, he said, I've had some good days. I've had some hills to climb. I've had some weary days. I've even had some sleepless nights. But when y'all look around just for a moment. When I look around and I think things, all of mine outweigh mine. And so instead of complaining, I'm going to just say,